Stephen Chbosky is a screenwriter and director turned novelist, probably best known for his novel and film, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I love this book personally, and I just reread it, so there's no better time for me to take a look at some of the advice Stephen Chbosky's given to other writers. Though he often directs his advice towards young writers in particular, all the advice I'm going to cover here, I think, is useful whether you're 18 or 118, so see if you agree with me on that. Here's the first tip. Number 1, never use the word aspiring, and I'll tell you why I feel that way. To be a writer, it comes from the verb, if you write, you're a writer. Starting off really concisely and clearly here, this is an opinion I definitely share and I bring up every so often on this channel, so apologies if you've heard it before. The reason I think it's so important is because yes, it's empowering, yes, it's kind of motivational in a way, and yes, it gives power and autonomy to writers. All that stuff is fantastic. We should all be looking at ourselves in that way. But it also subtly takes away some power from outside sources that think they get to define what a writer is, like traditional publishing, awards, and that one guy in your book club. You know that guy. These sources, and a load of other ones, might not be inherently bad, but there's nothing about any single one of them that qualifies them to say whether you are a writer or not. They don't get to decide that. Publishers are just here to sell books. They can't gatekeep your creativity or decide if you're a writer or not. Awards are nice, but they're subjective and at times biased. And that guy in your book club can f***. The point here is, as Stephen Chbosky says, you get to decide that you're a writer. So I'd make a real effort to do that if you haven't already. This isn't a world where you need to wait around for a promotion or where you need to earn a title. External success in writing is far too subjective and varied to be a requirement for considering yourself a writer. A writer is anyone who writes stories. The only requirement is that, you write them. So go forth from this video considering yourself a writer if you don't already. Number 2, I believe that writer's block comes from when you're trying to edit too quickly. You're being too harsh on your own words, but what you should do is write today, then edit tomorrow. That way you're free today to create, and tomorrow you can edit and cut and make changes. There's lots of discourse and lots of advice out there about writer's block, and some of it's practical advice and some of it's more motivational or outlook-based advice. The practical side is often full of people saying stuff like develop a writing routine and stick to it, or just write anyway, and that kind of thing, which can be useful for some writers and maybe not so much for others. To me though, a practical approach only deals with half the problem of writer's block. If you feel truly empty and directionless, if you're struggling with your mental health maybe, or you're just feeling really uninspired, but you still always want to keep pushing towards your goal of writing this story, then just trying to churn out anything at all can make things feel worse because you start to consider yourself failing even to do that. But similarly to the other approach, the motivational side of writer's block, the idea of doing other things besides writing and hoping you can contribute towards your story or find inspiration again, can be similarly fruitless because while you're doing all that stuff, the cursor on your page isn't actually moving. You're still sitting on that same sentence that you got stuck on. What I like about Chbosky's advice here though, is that it's a little of both. There's a practical element of it, the just keep writing, that's there, but so's the mental side or the outlook side. He's just split the two processes into different tasks to be done at different times. Write on one day, that's the practical side. Edit and assess and think on day 2. If you're anything like me, I edit as I write quite heavily. So when things aren't going well, I slow right down. But if I could do what he says and split the two processes, maybe I would get a lot more done. Save the worries and the doubts about what you're writing for tomorrow. Easier said than done, I know. But try to be a conduit today through which any idea at all can come, and then tomorrow you can be as critical as you want because you'll have something besides a blank page to edit. It's worth a shot, I think. Sometimes a different routine and a different mindset can make a difference, but whatever the case, if I can add some advice of my own, I'll say treat yourself with care. If you've got writer's block right now or things just aren't going well, don't assume that you're absolutely done for. Instead, look inward, listen to yourself, maybe have a conversation with your inner child. I know that sounds weird, but maybe they're burned out and tired and they just want to rest or play for a while. That's something I'm trying to do myself at the moment because I don't do it enough. But lately I've been taking time, which I don't really have with running my own business and a part-time job and all that other stuff. But I'm taking time just to create little music projects and stuff like that. Fun things have their place and they're essential to help you recharge. We deserve downtime. It doesn't have to be all work all the time. This is art, and play is a big part of creativity, which brings me nicely onto the next tip. Number 3, Young writers need to be kind to themselves. It takes time to master things. People have spent more time reading and consuming books than they have writing them, so there's this disconnect that happens where they can recognise the greatness of a writer or a filmmaker, but they can't duplicate it yet, and that's really frustrating. You need time to write and create, time to allow your writing to catch up to your consumption. I love this advice. I'm very much in favour of any advice for creatives that starts with look after yourself. In a world of toxic hustle culture and the never-ending commodification of art and creativity, I find we're all in danger of losing the point of writing and creating, which is really just to enrich our lives in some way, our own or other people's. Hopefully both. Book publishing started as a way to share great stories with more people, to pass the experience someone had in hearing them onto other humans with other beating hearts and other firing synapses. But the way things are now, you'd think that books were invented just to give publishers something to sell. And in that atmosphere or that environment, I agree with Chbosky. What could it be other than frustrating and disheartening when a writer's first attempt seems so far from every book that they love and admire? I feel like I'm on my soapbox more than normal in this video, sorry about that, but I think we're all just a bit conditioned by our phones and streaming services and same-day delivery to want results now. We want what we want as soon as physically possible, which I guess is a natural thing that we've kind of built up to. But if you think about it, that doesn't fit with art and creativity, and definitely not with writing, in my opinion. It takes a long time to write a novel, and it's a huge leap of faith, and that can feel really unnatural the first time you try it. But there's value in that process. That's really the point. Taking the time to risk something, even if it's just a risk of wasting some time and some effort, in order to write something that might matter, I think is the entire point of all of this. And you can't get there by expecting perfection immediately. Writing is a staircase, and the first thing you ever write is just the first step, and you can't reach that aspirational doorway up above you with just one step, I know, but you'll never reach it at all if you don't leave that step there and pile another one on top of it and keep going. So yes, be kind to yourself. Whether you're a young writer or a not so young writer, the world is whizzing by us at 1,000,000 miles an hour with all of its popular things and its wild successes and its money. I know, let it. Build your own staircase at your own pace. You'll get there. You just got to support yourself. Did you know I have an editing service where you can send me your work and I'll both line edit and developmental edit it for you? It's all done through my website, and my approach is friendly and supportive all the way through, whether it's your first story or your millionth. Feel free to request a quote. I've worked with over 100 writers and I've never had any bad feedback. Or if you're curious about my work, you want to get additional content, or you want some personalised answers to your writing questions in video format, you can get all of that and more on my Patreon. I'd love to have you. Links for both are below. On to the next tip. Number 4. Since I was a very slow reader, I thought I wasn't allowed to be a novelist. So I thought, well, I watch a lot of movies, I guess I read movies, so okay, I'll write movies. That misunderstanding is the foundation of my career. I'm a born novelist who's trained exclusively in film. Now, the two art forms are very complementary. The combination of my novelist nature and cinematic training has led to richer movies and more enjoyable books. I picked out this quote for a couple of reasons. Firstly, to highlight those outside factors again. Chbosky mentions here when he was young and maybe more impressionable, he thought he wasn't allowed to be a novelist because he read slowly. That's a great example of how easy it can be to be pushed away from something that we love and feel drawn to, when in reality, all that matters is if we enjoy doing it. Really, that's all that matters. You might be thinking, yeah, but if you're terrible at something, it's no fun. I've heard that before, but is that really true? I'm pretty bad at some stuff. I love music, I listen to a lot of it, and as I said before, I try to make it. I have guitars and stuff, but I'm not really musically talented, and I know that, but it's still so much fun for me to mess around recording things, trying to make them sound good with what few tools and instincts I have. Again, it's play. You don't have to be good at playing to benefit from it. When you come in last place in a game of Mario Kart with your friends, nobody says to you, yeah, you should probably never play again, this clearly isn't for you. They say, that was fun, let's do it again. I think we should treat writing in exactly the same way. Was it fun to write? Was it even fun just to imagine something? Because you're here watching videos about writing, clearly you do find that fun. So keep doing it and don't question for a second if you're allowed to. No one owns your mind. I feel passionate about this because I don't want other passionate people to never give things a shot for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with what they want and everything to do with other people who are probably too scared to try anything like this themselves. You're not. We do it. The second reason I wanted to highlight this quote is just to talk about the parallels between writing movies and TV and writing books, and to highlight that while they have different audiences maybe and different formats, they're not really all that far apart. My writing's been called cinematic. as I'm always mentioning, I know. And I take that as a compliment because I love films in a different way than books, for sure, but it's still storytelling. We still end up in the same place, whether we're reading a really good book or watching a really good film. Stephen Chbosky is obviously a great example of this, since he's done both, and his work gives us a really solid example of this crossover. I read this book, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, years ago, and I've read it a bunch of times since. It's a thoughtful, impactful, and quite moving book, I think. Then the movie came out and I watched it. In fact, my wife Hayley and I just watched it again recently, and the movie is thoughtful, impactful, and quite moving, I think. Stephen Chbosky did both. He wrote the novel and the film and directed it as well. Obviously, is extremely talented to be able to do all of that, but my point is it's all different streams that run down into the same ocean, I think. So if you consider yourself a book writer and you're thinking about screenwriting, try it. I'm certainly hoping to in the future, when I get time. Not because I want to make a movie out of any of my stories in particular, but because it'll be fun for me, and that's all that matters. You're not supposed to be a novelist or supposed to be a screenwriter. You're a thoughtful, creative person, and you'd still be that person no matter which stream you're floating down. I've made a ton of these author advice videos, so have a look through this playlist to find your favourite author. Don't forget to check out my Patreon or my website at the links below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and happy writing.